Hi there, this is Chris Chapping the Cap, Moto Legends. Today we're going to talk about a new boot, a new adventure boot from our cousins in America, from Klim, and the boot is called the Adventure GTX boot. Listen, other than the fact that these guys don't always know how to pronounce their own brand name, we love what the folk at Klim do. They really are a breath of fresh air to this industry. They are all mad keen bikers, and I emphasize that because if we were to look at most of the European clothing manufacturers, you might be amazed to learn that most of them can count maybe less than a handful of real bikers on their entire complement of staff. I'm not saying that to work at Klim you have to be a biker, but most of them are, and certainly when they are researching products, they're going out on the road and testing them and photographing. For example, they go out at night to make sure that all the reflective stuff works. At those times, everyone in the company gets involved, and that just doesn't happen anywhere else. Now, they work in this design center, it contains the design offices and the management offices. They are in the middle of a huge field, and that huge field is in the middle of a huge state called Idaho. Now, that might cause you to think that these guys are in the middle of nowhere, but you would be wrong. And I know because I went and checked a map, and actually they are just to the left of the middle of nowhere. But I would suggest that's a good thing. That isolation from what's going on over here enables them to be more creative about the products that they produce. They don't compare everything that they're doing with what the European brands are doing. So when they get given a brief to create a product, these guys kind of start with a blank sheet. They start from scratch. They come up with their own solutions, their own ideas. Over here, by contrast, I think that there is a lot of plagiarism. I think a lot of the manufacturers go to something like the EICMA show in Milan in Italy. They see a boot and they just copy it. And we've seen this a lot. Someone comes out with a novel product, and then over the next 2 years, everyone else just copies that product. So we're talking here today about an adventure boot, and I think this is a prime example. This is a boot from TCX. These are slightly different models, but in essence, they're both adventure boots. But everybody else, there must be at least a dozen copies of this same boot. They'll all come with this same matte black leather or this mottled brown leather. They will differ in certain ways. They'll have different arrangements on the shin plates. Some will have 2 buckles, some 1, some 4, and so on. But they are all more or less the same. And from 10 meters, you will not be able to tell one boot from the other. The differences between them are nothing more, in my view, than cosmetic. And it's why the boots that we're talking about today, the Adventure GTX, GTX standing for Gore-Tex, it's why this boot is so refreshing. It's like no other adventure boot on the market. Now, before I put this review together, I spoke to Jason in Idaho. Jason is their product line manager. In fact, he wasn't at work. They're still on furlough over there. But I spoke to him about the brief, and he said that the brief obviously was for an adventure boot, but they wanted to create an adventure boot that they knew was going to be spending the majority of its time on the road. Now, if one's honest, that's where most adventure boots spend their time, because if you're spending all of your time off-road, you buy a proper off-road boot. So an adventure boot is a boot that you wear on the road, but you can also wear off the road. But Klim accepted that most of the people who would be buying this boot would be spending certainly 70% of the time on the road. Yet it still had to be able to cope with the trails and the muddy and the rocky paths that adventure bike riders would take, certainly in America, but also in Europe, that they would take to get off the road, to get off the beaten track. What they didn't want was to create a big, plastic, uncomfortable off-road boot of the sort that you get from people like Alpinestars. But the boot still had to be tough enough to tackle those conditions, to protect you if you did fall off and you fell against rocks and so on. So this boot had to be tough, it had to work as a road boot, but importantly, very importantly, it had to also work as a walking boot. And again, that's implicit in their view, and I think in my view, in the whole adventure ethos. Because let's say you've been riding all day. In America, it's not uncommon, you ride all day and then you take some track off the road and you go and camp somewhere. If you've been riding all day, you're setting up camp, you're not going to be taking those boots off until you go to bed. You might want to walk up to the top of the hill to get a great photo of a vista, but these boots needed to provide all-day comfort. Similarly, if you're an adventure rider over here, where perhaps there's less likelihood of doing that off-road bit, but you've been on the bike all day, you're down in southern Europe, you come across this beautiful medieval village in northern Italy, you think that would be a great place to go and explore and walk around the rampart. So you get off the bike, you're going to need a boot that's going to be fine when you're riding, but it's still going to provide the comfort you need for a couple of hours walking around this old town. So given all of that, you can see that the brief for this boot was a pretty demanding one. This is the aforementioned Adventure GTX boot, the boots that we have been talking about. Got a pair here. I don't need both of them to talk through the details, so I'm just going to throw this one to Graham. It's really heavy, so I'm hoping not to knock the lights over. Well done, Graham. The boot is constructed using a series of very rugged, very tough synthetic materials. Klim haven't told us, surprisingly, because they normally do, they haven't told us what these materials are, but they're going to be microfibers, materials like Lyrica of some sort. They are applied in 2 layers in certain areas of the boot, depending on whether they wanted extra reinforcement or a bit extra comfort. One thing that I think we can be absolutely confident about with this boot is that no cows suffered in the making of it. There is on the toe here, in the toe box area, there's a layer of material that feels like suede, but it won't be real suede. It'll be an Alcantara fabric of some description. The shin and the ankles are covered here with a shin plate. I'll come back to this, but you've got a plastic shin plate here. You've got plastic here on the outside of the ankle, and you've got another plastic here, another plastic panel here on the inside of the ankle. You've got a tough gear change selector here on both boots. Now, this boot has a particularly generous toe box, and when I spoke to Jason at Klim, he was at odds to tell me why they'd done this, and it's because they wanted this boot to be so good as a walking boot, so comfortable as a walking boot. And apparently your average motorcycle boot has quite a narrow toe box, and that doesn't always work for walking, and for walking you just want a little bit more wiggle room for the toes. So this is a deeper, wider toe box, not such that you're going to have problems changing gear, but there's just a little bit more room in here. The shaft of the boot, both front and aft, in fact all the way round, there's a degree of padding so it feels nice and comfortable when you're wearing it. But you've got, in particular, you've got some soft pads at the front and at the back. And they are there for assistance when you're either walking or sitting on the bike or standing on the bike. When you're walking, you're moving to and fro, and these are just going to make it a little bit more comfortable. Nothing less comfortable than a hard plastic boot when you're walking around a bit uphill or around town. But when you're sat on the bike, you will often be putting the back of the leg, putting pressure on the back of the boot. So again, that softness there is just going to make it more comfortable. The contrast is when you're standing on the bike, you're leaning forward, you're riding off-road, you will often be leaning on the front of the boot. So again, it becomes very uncomfortable if that's hard plastic there. So these areas just make the boot a little bit more comfortable. The waterproofing comes, as I've mentioned before, from Gore-Tex. Now, Gore-Tex is a fabulous membrane. There are people out there who will not buy a boot or a jacket or a glove unless it is Gore-Tex lined. Not sure we feel quite that strongly. You do get, with Gore-Tex, you get their guarantee to keep you dry, lifetime guarantee. But I would not get too fussed by that, because I'm not sure that it really means a lot, because what Gore-Tex are saying in essence is that our membrane, provided it's never damaged, it's always going to work. Well, I suppose any membrane, as long as it's not damaged, is going to work. So the only time the membrane won't work is if it's pierced in some way, in which case that's wear and tear, it's not guaranteed, or if the taping around the edge of the membrane comes apart, then again, that's not the fault of the membrane. So Gore-Tex is a fabulous membrane. It does not leak and it breathes as well as any, but I would not personally get too fussed about the fact that it's Gore-Tex, but some people just like it. In terms of the sole, this is a very rugged, it's a super tough looking SAS Navy SEAL type sole. Looks as though it's the kind of thing that should come as a standard fitment on a Hummer. On the inside here of the sole, you get what's called an instep guard. And what that is for is, many off-road bikes, adventure bikes, you'll have those metal pegs with sharp bits in for extra grip. They can ruin the sole of a boot. So this instep guard is just a harder plastic. You won't damage the sole of the boot if you're standing on the pegs and putting a lot of pressure on the pegs. Ankles, both sides, you've got a layer inside of an XRD foam. Now that's there as a protection. It's a 5mm thickness of XRD foam, so that's there to absorb impact. But what it's going to do also, as you're just wearing the boot, it means that you're not pushing up hard against the plastic outer, so that's just going to make the boot a little bit more comfortable to wear. You've also got these concertina stretch panels, articulation panels here on the front of the boot and also at the back of the boot, and again that just helps when you're walking around. It just makes the boot a little bit more comfortable to live with. You've got this single ski strap and buckle on the outside of the boot. What that does, a bit like a ski boot, when you do the clasps up around the ankle on a ski boot, it's pulling your heel into the heel of the boot. So that's what will happen here. It will mean that once you've got this boot tightened the way it should, your heel should not lift out of the boot. There are actually 3 systems for the ingress and egress on this boot. You've got initially this Velcro strap, now this Velcro flap. That's huge. I don't care how high your instep is, I don't think you're going to have a problem getting in and out of this boot. That does up. You've then got, as we've mentioned, the ski buckle here that will pull your heel into the heel of the boot. This is adjustable. You just adjust this strap here like any ski boot, so you can tighten that and loosen it as you see fit. But the most trick adjuster on this boot is a BOA lacing system that tightens the boot around the calf, around the shin. So it's a twist and dial mechanism. You push it in, you tighten it. And it works particularly well because 2 people have got the same size foot. Let's say 2 of us have got a size 44 foot. Someone will have thin, spindly legs like me, and someone will have great big rugby player calves. And we're not all going to fit in the same boot. So with this boot, you can adjust it so whatever your foot size, you can make this comfortable for you. Inside, you've got an antimicrobial insole, which just means it doesn't absorb the moisture as much and it doesn't start to smell after a while. There is a spare one that comes in the box. The insole, by the way, has a gel pad, so the idea is that over time your foot molds into that. It's just going to make the boot a little bit more comfortable. The boot also comes with a thing that we've not really seen over here, but it's quite well known in America, a half size adjuster. So it's an insert that you put in the boot that will make it half a size smaller. So I suppose the logic of that is if you're unsure about the size to go for one that's one size too big, or err on the side of generosity, go one size too big, because then if it is, you can put the adjuster in and that might accommodate the different size. That also allows you to then wear a much thicker sock, obviously, if you need to. What Klim have told us emphatically is that this is a boot that is designed to be worn inside the leg of a trouser, and that's what I would expect. But I see people wearing these boots where they put their trousers on the inside, but the problem with that is you will ruin the benefit of the BOA lacing system, because the idea is that you can adjust that and make it tight around the ankle. If you've got a trouser in there, that's going to tighten the trouser and the seams and so on, and maybe the zips into the calf, and that won't be comfortable. Nice thing, by the way, and I didn't mention it before and I should have done, but what is particularly nice about this system with the BOA lacing adjuster is that it works really well when you've got a gloved hand. So there are lots of boots with adjusters around here, but this is so simple. Even with a thick winter glove on, you just pull it to release it, you push it to tighten it. It couldn't be easier. So our conclusion, the Adventure GTX boot, I think it's simply an extraordinary boot. It is protective, it is comfortable. I've not ridden in it, I've got to say, but I've worn these around the office, looked a bit of an idiot, but the boot is comfortable to wear. Klim tell us that this is a boot, they've tried to give this boot what might be called an all-day comfort factor. Now, it just so happened that on our Facebook page recently, I was talking about a different boot, but I mentioned about these particular boots being all-day comfortable, and someone came back and said, oh, I doubt that that's the case. Well, I disagree. I've done lots of adventure riding and I've worn boots all day long, and they have been more or less comfortable to wear all day. These are more comfortable than any of the boots I've ridden before, so I do not see why you couldn't ride all day in these boots, wear them in the evening. You're not going to go to bed in them, but I think as far as the adventure riding aesthetic goes, you're not going to find a boot that is more comfortable than this. Last question might be, being this kind of boot having all these trick features, Gore-Tex, BOA lacing and so on, these are going to be expensive boots. Well, yes, they're from Klim, they're going to be expensive. So the boot costs £450. Is that expensive? Well, we sell Daytonas that are that price and more. In fact, the nearest boots to this, the nearest equivalent boot to this, I think, is probably the Daytona Trans Tourman. That is £560, so it's more expensive than that, but I do think that boot is overpriced, and I don't think it has half the features that we get with this boot. It's much heavier, and I just don't think it's going to be a comfortable boot to walk around in. So all in all, I think this is a fantastic boot. Come and see us, try it on. I think you'll fall in love with it. If you'd like to see more adventure boots or more gear from Klim, then visit the website motolegends.com. If you'd like to learn more specifically about the Adventure GTX boot, then if you click on one of the links on the screen, sometimes they're up there, sometimes they're down there, that will take you to a dedicated page on the website. Once you're there, you can check out the spec in a little bit more detail, you can check out availability, and obviously if you want to buy a pair of the boots, you can do that there and then. Now, when you buy from us, we try to make the process as simple, straightforward and risk-free as we possibly can. There's no delivery charge on any item of protected wear that you buy from us. Returns are totally free, and what's more, we give you a full 12 months in which to decide whether you do want to return something to us. We have the best price promise in the business. Now, John Lewis was rightly famed for its never knowingly undersold price promise. We actually go one stage better. If you can find anyone selling anything that we sell at a price that is below ours, we will beat that competitor's price by a full 10%. If the retailer is in the EU and not in the UK, we will match their landed price. Now, there are a few terms and conditions, nothing particularly onerous, but if you are going to price beat us, I suggest you visit the website and check out what those terms and conditions are. If in the future you'd like to receive bulletins from us about new products, then if you go to the website, at the top of every page, there's a piece of script that says newsletter sign up. Click on there, within seconds you'll be in business. In future, you'll receive news from us about any new releases. If you prefer, however, to get your information videographically, that is to say in this form, we would be simply delighted if you wanted to become a subscriber to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking on the button below. Now, this is 2021. In 2020, we gave away a Mutt 125cc machine disguised as a Steve McQueen Desert Sled bike. We gave that bike away to someone who was a subscriber to our YouTube channel. This year, 2021, we're doing something a wee bit different. We're going to be giving away a 250cc Fantic Caballero Scrambler bike to somebody who follows us on Facebook. We're going to be giving the bike away just before Christmas this year, so if you want to stand a chance of winning that bike, and it's a fabulous bike, then visit our Facebook page and obviously follow us. I'd like to finish with a little play for our fabulous little shop here at Motor Legends. We are based about a mile from the centre of Guildford, a mile from the railway station. And as I've suggested, it's a small shop, it has a small footprint, but it's attached to our warehouse where we have more than £2 million worth of stock arranged on 3 floors. Technically, that makes this the second largest motorcycle apparel shop in the UK. But we actually believe that we are far more than just the amount of merchandise we have here in the building. We're all about service, we're all about personal fitting. If you want to check us out, visit Trustpilot. We have the highest 5-star ranking in the business. When you come and see us, we'll serve you only the finest Italian illy coffee, or we'll serve you proper Yorkshire tea in a proper teapot. And if you're lucky, who knows, you might even get to sample one of Sean's mum's delicious motorcycle-shaped shortbread biscuits. Anyway, this has been Chris. I hope to talk to you again soon.